Hello and welcome to 4,000 and Counting. I'm Watty, and today I am joined, as you can see, by Kirk McKnight. Kirk put together a very, very cool book. It is The Voices of Hockey. Broadcasters reflect on the fastest game on earth. Now, everyone that knows 4,000 and Counting, I'm not a big reader, and if you're gonna send me something, Audible's where it's at. And Kirk was kind enough to send me a copy, send Mark and Graham a copy, and we're actually going to be able to chuck a few copies to our listeners. So if you stick around on our social media this week, you can find out how you can get your hands on one of those copies. Kirk, welcome to 4,000 and Counting. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me all the way over there.
Yeah, well, get the word out on the UK side. I've really enjoyed what I've heard from the book so far. What was the what was the brain moment that made it click and go, right, I've got an idea? And how did you decide to go down the broadcaster route as opposed to maybe a coach or a player, or what made it be the voices?
I think what happens with a broadcaster is they're it's not to say that the players aren't gracious and with their time, but they're a lot harder to reach, I think. I think broadcasters have that ambassadorship that is demanded of them, and so they're a little bit more. They're a little bit more, or they're easier to find. And so
Yeah.
what I did was, not only are they kind of easier to track down a little bit, except for like the big ones, but the fact that they are with the teams for so long, they sit there and are there for like the entire careers of these players, and then maybe the entire career of a whole nother player. Mike Lang in Pittsburgh, he was broadcasting for the Penguins long before Lemieux came, and he broadcast for a good portion of Sidney Crosby's career as well.
Yeah, it's
So when you
wild.
can
It's
kind of,
wild, isn't it?
yeah, so when you can have that kind of longevity, and to be able to call, the entire career of somebody and the majority of another person, that's just a perfect example. You get a pool of just stories. And that's what I wanted to do, was to basically not tell the story myself, but tell the stories through the guys who are the storytellers.
Oh, it's really interesting so far. One of the interesting things I found, I believe it was the Chicago broadcaster. It says in the book that he's done 1/3 of the Blackhawks games. Now, when you go and look how many fucking games the Blackhawks have played over the years, that's insanity how many games this dude's done just for Chicago. Um, I don't want to totally kill any of the stories, but we can touch on bits and pieces. But as someone that is not a massive reader, but loves the game, and the audio is actually great. It's the furthest I've ever made it in an audiobook, so go me. But the way you hook someone into listening is tell the story from the old Eastern Hockey League in the 70s with a line brawl and then the penalty box brawl and then getting into it with the fans. And then I'm like, right, give me more stories. What made you put that first? Was it for that exact reason?
Well, the story was told by Bob Costas. And over here in the United States, anybody who's tuned into the Olympics and NBC's cover of the Olympics over the last decades on end will recognize Bob Costas. And so you don't realize it's Bob Costas until it says at the very end. And so to show that like somebody like that came from such humble beginnings where they were getting paid $30 a broadcast to broadcast a game, to basically see that whole tale go through and have him basically see this mayhem that takes place not only on the ice, but in the stands and all the way back to the dressing rooms. I mean, the players for Syracuse were on the other side of the door with their sticks raised because there were fans
So
trying
good.
to break through the dressing room door and take on the team themselves. And they were ready to go. And so to see all this and to see that Bob Costas, of all people, uh, was at the beginning stages of his career witnessing this, and then to see a movie like Slapshot with Paul Newman, and to realize that that stuff actually happened in these lower leagues, and that's probably not just relegated to the United States. I'm sure that things like this happen all over the world in these lower leagues because it's not the same. It's not, it's not on ESPN. It's not heavily guarded security wise because they can barely afford to pay the players. So it's not like they're getting, tons of money into security and all kinds of things like that. It's kind of like all bets are off in some of these lower leagues, and that's kind of why I wanted to introduce the book that way, to show that this is how hockey can take place, not only in the junior leagues, but like in the NHL level. There's plenty of stories like that at the NHL level, including the Boston Bruins going over the stands in New York to basically take on the fans in Madison Square Garden, one of the most famous arenas in the history of sports. And here they are just climbing over the glass and slapping and beating fans, beating them with their own shoes.
With
So I
shoes,
just kind of want to
yeah.
give that taste. I just want to give that taste of what insanity hockey can bring, even to somebody like Bob Costas.
And you look at the broadcaster, you touched on Slapshot. You look on the broadcaster and it's the fans are standing up to him. And by God, if I could get down there, I'd be standing up to him. Like, broadcasters are invested in this shit, even whether it's fact or fiction, whether it's a movie. But like, if you're following the boys, as a broadcaster, if you're doing 40 games a season with the same lads, you're gonna become friends with them. You might go for a couple of pops off, away from the rink, off the ice. You go hang out a little bit. I know from my time playing, like some of the guys like that, you end up being friends with, maybe like the photographers or the physios or the masseurs, whoever it is. You end up with these like kind of tight connections, and ultimately you're gonna hear shit that comes out the locker room more than the regular fan would. So you're probably gonna have a bit of skin in the game. You're gonna be intrigued. You're gonna be interested. You're gonna buy in. You're gonna want your boys to do well. So listening to it for the broadcaster's perspective is really interesting. You touched on there, Mike Milbury, and but I mean I know a lot about Terry O'Reilly, but when they were talking about just the sheer number of PIMs consecutively every season. What was it? 10 seasons straight, over 200.
Yeah, I mean the guy was ready to brawl. The guy was ready to fight, and I think that whole Irish community outside of Boston and inside of Boston kind of lended to that. I think that people kind of had that feel like he was one of us, one for us, one for the Southeast kind of thing. Like they likened themselves under that mentality, and so they followed it and were all about it. They weren't
I
winning
haven't got.
Stanley Cups
Sorry.
at that time, but they were, not to say that they weren't entertaining.
Oh yeah, super entertaining. You obviously got different chapters all the way throughout the book. I haven't made it to the Broad Street Bullies yet, but I imagine the broadcaster there is gonna have a couple of stories up his sleeve for when I get that far into the book. Is there anything you remember about the stories from the old Philadelphia Flyers days, the Broad Street Bullies days?
So the first-hand account from the Broad Street Bullies isn't even from a Philadelphia Flyers current broadcaster, because the two guys that are the broadcasters that are represented kind of talk about them from when they grew up. So, you get a little story about how the Broad Street Bullies kind of emerged. And so the first-hand account, as far as witnessing them while calling the game, comes from Bob Miller, who was calling the game for the Kings. He's a Hall of Famer. And he was witness to Ken Linsman basically going around the shuffle, around the circle of fighting, and basically taking out the skates of the Kings players with his stick.
Ooh.
Like he was kind of fighting pretty dirty, and so that was kind of
Cheap shot.
that was Bob Miller's insight into the Broad Street Bullies, is seeing Ken Linsman doing something like that. But there still are the stories there, because a lot of these broadcasters are calling games for a team that they watched growing up and watched on TV and knew all the stories. So they knew the history of the way that the Bullies kind of said, you know what, we kind of make a mark for ourselves, and we make a statement. And with that statement, we kind of increase that intimidation factor. And now we're winning 2 straight Stanley Cups. That was kind of what happened. Was they basically were kind of getting beaten around to a certain point, but then it was like, enough's enough. They made that statement fight, or took somebody out, and it took the wind out of the other team's sails, and it propelled the Flyers to continue on and basically go through the rest of the Eastern Conference and then go on to win the Cup 2 straight years.
Yeah, great for them. And like, I obviously you can see from our logo, we don't mind the fisticuffs around here. So listening to some of the old stories was great. I love in the Detroit chapter. Obviously, they talk about how many fucking studs that Detroit had over the years. Like they just start listing them off, starting way back with Gordie Howe, and then they get into the story of Fedorov's 5 goal game. And I remember that. I was listening to it in the gym yesterday, and I was like, man, I remember he had 5 goals in a 5-4 game. And it was like wild. And then to fast forward on, they start discussing, the rivalry between the Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings, the infamous Claude Lemieux and Darren McCarty incident. Now, again, go back to the logo, but as you can imagine, when that was going on, I was 11, 12 years old, already loved the physical game, loved Claude Lemieux, loved Darren McCarty, and then the incident happens with Draper, and wow, it all goes off in the next game. It was interesting to hear him talk about the game after the massive brawl, where just back to kind of like regular. It just dies down a little bit. I think everyone maybe got it out their system. The boys kind of got their vendettas taken care of. But what a cool story, and really interesting to hear it from their perspective again.
I agree. And what's funny is in 97, they're talking about those brawls and there's blood on the ice. And they're saying, I can't believe there weren't any ejections. They're like, today in 2024, 2025, there would be ejections all over the place. And there were those stories too. There were stories where Philadelphia and Ottawa had 419 penalty minutes and the benches only had 3 players apiece by the end of the game. But in 97, 97 was 7 years before that Philadelphia Ottawa game. That game in 97 between Detroit and Colorado, there were no suspensions. And to watch the footage and the fights that just go on and on, you're like, how is nobody getting kicked out of this game? Let alone the guy who there was already a fight going on. So Darren McCarty didn't start all the fights. There was a fight going on between Larry Onif and I can't remember who. But McCarty, when he went after Lemieux, obviously that was the pinnacle moment for Detroit. That's the moment where the fans just really got into it. McCarty didn't get kicked out of the game. Not only that, he scored the overtime game-winning goal. So that really was the punctuation mark on that whole night. And that really propelled Detroit to finally end a 42-year cupless drought. That momentum from a March game followed into April, May, and June until they lifted the cup and basically expelled and exorcised all the demons, especially the demon of having the season that they had the year before and not making it to the cup final, losing to Colorado, having Draper get his jaw wired shut in that hit from Lemieux, and just so many coulda, shoulda, wouldas. It basically erased all that. The fans were forgiving. The fans were so amped, and that's what happened. They finally got over that hump and finally won the cup.
Like when you were a kid my age, so I'm 39 now, but we're looking back to, let's call it 94 to 98, maybe even 2000. Those Red Wings teams back then was so stacked. Like they're insanely stacked. And then kind of like a little bit later on, then they start bringing in guys like Brett Hull as like a fucking depth guy. Like they're like it was just like the no salary cap era was insane. Like Fedorov started wearing the Nike skates. Lidstrom was just like coming into his own and being an absolute stud. But the thing that I loved that they touched on in their story was the third and fourth line guys, the fuck you guys, the glue guys, the guys that win you the Stanley Cup. Because ultimately, yeah, you need Lidstrom, you need him, you need Stevie Y, you need Thomas Holmstrom, you need Fedorov. But you need McCarty, you need Maltby, you need Draper, you need these guys down the lineup who are going to eat pucks, block shots, finish every hit, back check hard, fight if they need to, do whatever they're going to do to help the team win, shut down the top team's lines. I thought it was really interesting, and as a player, I love to see those guys getting their flowers.
Yeah, when you scan on through to the Anaheim chapter, the Anaheim Ducks in 2003 had a pretty decent team, and they almost won the cup against the Devils, a Devils team that was kind of concluding a dynasty in there. And the addition of Scott Niedermayer and Chris Pronger to that team a few years later, that is what makes that difference, is having two guys on the same line like that. Niedermayer and Pronger, that will propel a team because you obviously have your stars. You have your Corey Perry, young Ryan Getzlaff. You have Timu Solani on that team. But when you have that blue line and you have Niedermeyer and Pronger, that is a statement in and of itself. And the Red Wings had several players who were part of all four of those Cup teams. If it weren't for Bobby Orr, I'd say Nicholas Lidstrom was the greatest defenseman of all time. I'll just say that.
I would I would still say, including Bobby Orr, Nicholas Lidstrom is the greatest defenseman of all time.
I mean, I would. I mean, I only say that because I worry about the backlash out of the Boston area.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And the fact that Gretzky himself said the two greatest players ever weren't me, but Gordie Howe and Bobby Orr. But yeah, like those are those difference makers that will definitely put the team over the hump and just make that difference. And Chicago was able to build a dynasty, and a lot of those players weren't named Kane. And those players were the ones responsible for backing up superstars like Kane. Now, I'm not trying to take away from Kane. He's my favorite player, and he obviously is one of the greatest, if not the greatest American-born hockey player ever. But he had that.
I would agree.
Cap. Yeah, and he had that supporting cap.
Well, they talk about Andrew Ladd, and they get the hot mic on him for the radio. They ask him, like, how does it feel? You worked your whole life. And what does he say? Let's fucking go or something. Like it's like a real quick. And then they're like, that's in the jingle for the radio station now. Like they're like, let's go. We don't need anything else. We're good. Like but guys like that who were those depth guys again. Like, and anytime you talk about someone winning a cup. Mike Rupp being the game winner, Darren McCarty being the game winner, like these guys down the roster that, in the regular season, they might chip in with 10, 12, 14 goals, but come the playoffs in a really shortened series of maximum 28 games, and you look and they've got 9 plus fucking 9. All of a sudden, you're like, let's go. These guys that step up big come playoff time and ultimately earn their money. That's where you earn your paycheck. It's great doing it 82 games in a regular season, but no one gives a shit who wins the President's Trophy. No one cares. Like it's almost a curse. Almost like winning that President's Trophy is almost like, oh great. You want to be going into the playoffs in good form and with guys up and down the lineup that can do damage. And I like the props that a lot of the lower end NHL guys. You're still talking about these guys are still like legit studs. If they went and played in any other league in the world, they'd be playing first and second line. Like they'd be playing PP minutes. They'd be eating minutes for fun. But the best league in the world. These guys are even back then when there was an enforcer role and there was a couple of guys on each roster. A lot of those enforcers could play. Some people like give them a bit of discredit and say that they couldn't play, but you look at, depending on how far back you want to go look at Dave Schultz, Terry Wright, like those guys, and then fast forward, McSorley could eat minutes and keep going, and there's guys that could do the job and do it well, but now you look at a fourth line. And these kids were fucking flying straight out of college, straight out of junior A, like maybe 1 year in the AHL where they put up 60 points. Like these are legit hockey players up and down the lineup. It's just good to see them get their recognition.
When the Golden Knights went to the Cup final in year one, you look at the fourth line on that team. It was a very impressive numbers wise across the board, and that's what people weren't expecting for us expansion team to have 4 solid lines. You look at some of the teams right now that just come up short of the playoffs. They have those top 2 lines that are killing it, but the third and fourth line are just a little bit below the water line or whatever it is. And so that's really kind of what will start to make that difference and make those deep playoff runs. That's why these President's Trophy winners don't necessarily have the gas in the tank to finish it all because they're coasting, they're cruising, and they're not making the deals like the Panthers made for Marchand. Look at what Marchand did this last season. This isn't in the book because the book is up through the 23-24 season, so it's got the first of the Florida Panthers Cup wins. But last season, Marchand coming in there from Boston and going over to Florida, you want to talk about a difference maker and a GM really making the right move at the right time. That's one right there.
Well, I support Tampa Bay, and the minute I saw him come, I was like, "Fuck! Come on!" Like, are they not good enough already? Let's just bring Marshy in. Why not? Yeah, let's bring this guy in. And like, there's a player that gets so much hate, and I get it if you hate him and you understand the game. But I kind of feel like a lot of the internet crowd, they don't really understand the game. They maybe saw him lick a face or fucking chop a guy or the stuff that he does with the puck, the stuff that he does without the puck. You see the energy he brings to the locker room. All the boys, fucking anyone that plays with him, absolutely loves him. Like you know, you saw this year. It's very different in the social media era. You actually get to see these boys celebrate the cup a little bit more, you know, and they're down in the Caribbean and they're getting after it and they're boozing. And Marshy's center on everybody's videos. Everybody that's on the story, Marshy's there. Like they just love him. And like you say, the GM going out and doing that bit of business. And then to be able to keep him this year, to keep Bennett this year, to keep Chuck this year, keep Seth Jones this year, like sucks to be a fucking Tampa fan right now. Our nearest and dearest rivals are just they're doing business the right way. They're doing business so well.
The cup final has been in Florida 6 straight years. So you
Yep.
got two stories of two teams in Florida that built it the right way. The fact that the Lightning has still been relevant in the playoffs, even at the tail end of this, and they haven't won the cup since 21, but still, like uh, these moves that these people make, and I think the first time around with Florida getting Tarasenko in that first run, that was another big move. And then like I said, with Marchand in this next one, but yeah, you're right. Like when you kind of see those things go by and you're that close and you're that team that's still relevant but that close and not getting over that hump, even though it's like when you get to the Tampa Bay chapter, the broadcaster says it all. It says they played a lot of hockey in a very short amount of time. And when you have
I spoke
three
about it on
runs
here.
like that, and that might be something that Florida has to withstand this next year. You got to think about Florida's got 2 straight cups, but they've got 3 straight cup appearances.
Finals.
That's three
Yeah.
deep playoff runs in a row. That may take a toll coming into year 4. A lot of people don't want to hear that, but that may happen. And that's kind of what happened with Tampa Bay and how they had those 3 straight deep runs. And so maybe the second or third round is where they peter out these next years.
And we spoke about it on the podcast. I had a couple of guests on some of the episodes I've done on my own, talking about the fact that normally get that All-Star break, and I'm so glad the All-Star break's gone for that last season. The Four Nations was inspired. It was epic. But you look at Florida's roster, you've got Bennett, you've got Marchand, you've got Kachuk, amongst other guys, like, so not only are you in 16 or 12 playoff series, sorry, you've then got this chucked in the mix. If you go again, one, two, three, maybe four, you're looking at 15, 16 extra rounds of hockey. Some of them going 6, some of them going 7. That's a lot of toll on the body. I think the NHL, I was watching 32 Thoughts this week with Sid and the boys on there. They had Sidney Crosby on, really interesting. But I think next year, or is it potentially the season after, they're looking at getting done like early June, cup presented early June. Give these boys a little bit longer off, and ultimately you look after your product, right? And
Yeah.
in the UK, we're done by April, second week in April, because generally the IIHF World Championships roll in week 2, week 3 of April for like warm up games, and then like end of April, start of May for the tournament. In the NHL, you're then playing another like 8 weeks on the back of that. Like it's fucking nuts. These guys play so much hockey. They put so much on their body, and ultimately they need their rest. And like you say, could it be Florida's downfall this year? I've gone against my own team, and I had to. One of the other shows over here asked me to do a prediction. Still can't see past Florida for the cup. Right. I still even with, and that was in my thoughts. Even I was like, man, they played a lot of hockey. But
Yeah.
and then I was trying to be like, who beats them? And I'm
Right.
I'm thinking, I'm like, I'll take the gamble that they can
Yeah.
figure a way of getting it done. I want to ask you a question because obviously we've gone straight into the book, but I would love to hear your background. So, what do you do for a day job? And obviously I've checked you out a little bit on social media and stuff, and see that you're into baseball as well. You've done some books on baseball. You've done another hockey book. So, what's your background like for career and getting into the kind of hockey side of things, and also like elaborating on the fact that you've done these other books?
Yeah, so I'm an editor for a weekly newspaper in Southwest Washington. I'm about an hour and 15 minutes north of Portland, Oregon, and about 2.5 hours south of Seattle, Washington. So that's what I do. I write for a living, which is great. It helps me to keep scratch the itch that I have to write. And with with sports, I've always been a fan of sports, especially both baseball and hockey. I've really stopped enjoying watching American football and basketball entirely. They just don't interest me anymore. And baseball and hockey present an eternal round, if you will. Like they basically have opposing seasons, so it's fun for me to be able to finish off a hockey season and start up a baseball season, and vice versa. And so
Yeah, you don't have that
that's
horrible thing that hockey fans have where they're just like looking at the calendar, looking at their clock
no,
from like over here from like the third week in May. You're like, okay, we've had a month off. We've still got 3 months to go. Everybody's just like, come on. You don't have that.
I'm not quite to that. I'm not quite to that yet, but I'll tell you, around September, right now, like we are. I mean, I'm not really interested in the preseason because to me, preseason means nothing. But I'm already ready for hockey to start. Like it's been 3 months since the Panthers raised the cup, and I was like, and that night I'm thinking, okay, so I got 3 months until hockey comes back, and like, well, what am I going to do now? But I am not like looking at the calendar or anything like that. But I do enjoy this time of year. It's postseason baseball and regular season hockey when everybody's coming out and everybody's got a chance and everybody's got hope, and we just see how things go for the rest of the year. But the most grueling postseason in any of the sports is hockey, and that's been tried
Oh
and
yeah.
tested. I mean, you get teams playing up to possibly 28 games, and if they go all the way, a minimum of 20 games probably, or unless they're sweeping their way through everything.
Realistically,
but
realistically, yeah, you're looking at
but
100 plus games in a season, which is fucking wild.
and that final and the Stanley Cup final, I was looking at the Stanley Cup final and the NBA championship as far as when they scheduled it. And the first game of the Cup final, I think, was before the first game of the NBA. But I swear, the way they spread out that NBA final, it was like every game was every 3 days. It was just way too drawn out. Hockey wasn't the same. I think there was maybe one or two at the most where there was 2 days rest off. But even at that even at that final stage, when they've already been through 18 to 20 games as it is, they're still playing every other day and still grueling it out. And it's not trying to get as much air time as the NBA is, and try. My interest is done with the NBA by this time.
Yeah,
If I even had any to begin in October when it started, by the middle to the end of June, no, I am done. I'm
yeah.
not that way with hockey.
So you talk about like obviously you edit and you write and stuff like that on a weekly basis. Are you writing solely about sports, or are you into other stuff as well?
I usually write stuff for like high school sports for these locals. I live in a very small town in Washington. I'm right on the Columbia River. It's like a river town, and yeah, I write the high school sports for a couple of schools in Oregon, as well as a couple of the teams. But I try to cover. Being the editor, I have to cover the front page stuff too. So there
Yeah.
there's different things. I just barely wrote up a story. A high school principal was basically nailed for sexual possession of sexually harmful material involving minors in Oregon.
Oh,
And so, like, you have to write some of those hard stories. And I hate writing those stories, honestly, because they're just so brutally weighted with just heavy and just so emotionally exhausting. But they still need to be, the public still need to, because people are like, freaking out. You got parents of these students like, was my kid involved in this? Was my kid affected by this? And you got to let them know, no, they weren't. And no, this is what the investigation shows, so that they get that peace of mind. Because it's like we're their outlet for that.
Gary.
You know that we they defer to us for these things, and when you don't cover them, they're in the office the next day like, why didn't you cover this? So
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 in this day and
the
age,
sports
are you? I was just gonna say, in this day and age, are you finding stories like that are still going out on the old newspaper, or are you guys kind of much more focused on pushing stuff online? Because I mean, like I used to get a local paper around here, Basingstoke Gazette. You know, it came through your door I think there was a Wednesday edition, there was a Friday edition, or maybe a Saturday edition. Like two editions a week. One was a free newspaper, and then the big juicy one at the weekend. You paid a couple of quid for it. Um, but now you barely see them in the news agents. You barely see them in off licenses. The only kind of places you see them promoting their stories and pushing their stories is online.
Yeah, I mean, most of the people here like their papers in print. They don't even bother with online. They're that old fashioned type to walk to the newsstand maybe, or to come to the mailbox on Thursday when they know it's going to be in their post office box or something like that. So I people do jump to online and they want it sooner or not, but we are kind of at the mercy of our limited capacity and our schedule, and we're writing these stories up right before we send them to print sometimes, and that's just the nature of it. And we'll share it online to appease the masses that way, and share it on social media. Uh, but I think a lot of our readers and our subscribers are those Tony Soprano type to walk to the edge of the driveway and
Yeah,
pick up that
just
paper in the morning, and those kinds of things. That's what I like to. That's what I like him to liken him to, because everybody has that image of Tony walking down in his robe and grabbing that newspaper and walking back up the driveway.
you touched on some of the like that unfortunate story that you have to edit and put out there. Outside of sports, what's your favorite story that you've ever got to be editor on? Like maybe like a bit of good news that you got to put out to the people. Because I find the news tends to be quite negative because the interesting stuff that happens is generally bad. Like you switch your news on and they're not going to be like, hey, this really cool thing happened today. They're going to be like, earthquake kills
Yeah.
475 people. Like it's generally going to be shit stuff, but every now and then something nice pops in and you're like, oh, that kind of raises my spirits. Is there any stories that stick out in your brain that like raise spirits?
Yeah, there's a real quick one. There was a guy who was kind of like a homeless guy in this town I used to live in Wickenburg. I was in Wickenburg, Arizona. That's 50 miles west of Phoenix. And he was kind of like a celebrity. He was a homeless guy, and people like would give him water or something, and he walked around barefoot, and and they didn't see him for a minute, and they were wondering what happened to him. What happened to him? Do you know what happened to Victor? Well, we get a phone call to from a guy, and it turns out to be this guy's brother that he hasn't seen in 20 years. And see, he's the type that would wander off, because that was kind of his mental state. He would wander off. He was a veteran, and he had issues. I don't want to attribute to post traumatic stress. I never interviewed the guy, but I know that he just kind of wandered off, and people, that was just how it was. But with the family like that, he wandered off and he doesn't come back, so they feared for the worst. But what had happened was um, he was finally injured in Wickenburg, and so they finally had to take him to Phoenix, to the hospital, and doing fingerprints and everything like that to find out, like, can we identify him. They realized that he's got family close by, and so they're able to
Oh,
connect with this family. And this is a family these are family members that pretty much thought he was dead, and have kind of in their minds given that hope up of him being alive for the last 20 years. And they were finally able to reunite with him, and
oh,
they were able
amazing.
to know, not only that, the story is the fact that they find out that he was in this community where people were feeding him and giving him water and looking after him. They feared the worst. They feared him being dead or just suffering. And to find out that he had been taken care of like this by the community, it just touched the hearts of his family, and they just really outpoured their gratitude. And so that story was a really feel good story that we put in the paper. And that would be the one where it's like, yeah, it's not that weighted and that exhausting, emotionally exhausting. It's emotionally uplifting, and it doesn't exhaust you and drain you. It
100%.
actually fills you up.
Oh yeah, that fires you up. I know we're kind of running low on time here. I got two more quick questions. obviously we touched on your favorite story from the day job. What about your favorite story from this series of stories within your book?
My favorite story is in the hockey book. It's to begin the Carolina Hurricanes chapter. Uh, Carolina Hurricanes were the Hartford Whalers, and so they move on from Hartford, Connecticut, on down the coast to the South, which at the time didn't make a lot of sense because hockey in the South wasn't really flourishing. You had your two teams in Florida, but you weren't really. We didn't have Nashville just yet. Nashville was coming in the next year, but in that area, you're kind of thinking hockey is not what we're thinking, and so they're trying to, I don't know if they're trying to ignite the fan base by introducing a mascot, in the preseason. Red Wings are in town. That's already a high ticket issue. And so they're thinking, okay, let's have this mascot be birthed out of the Zamboni. We'll introduce him by like giving birth to, it's a pig. We'll have him give birth to him out of the Zamboni. So we got a mascot dressed in a pig outfit, hiding in a Zamboni. They're bringing the Zamboni out on the ice, and they're having a guy in the corner yelling "Suey" like a hog collar in a state
Yeah,
fair.
yeah.
And he's not nothing's happening. Finally, the Zamboni driver stops the Zamboni, goes over and opens the door, and this guy just spills out on the ice, asphyxiating, and getting them having also on top of him breathing in a lot of carbon dioxide inside the Zamboni.
Shit.
He's also got this. He's also got this headdress on that they have to take off, and they rush him off to the hospital. But like the whole time, everybody's sitting there just playing it as one act, still yelling "Suey." The guy's like almost dying on the ice, and they're thinking, what is going on in these production guys' heads to think that this is a good idea to stuff somebody in a compartment like that with all that for X amount of time and being in a costume? So that's how the Carolina Hurricanes introduced, and they still talk about to this day, introduced their mascot, Stormy the Pig.
So this is why I've really enjoyed the book. I've started to learn some stories I haven't heard before. And the final question, I know you're on kind of a lunch break there, but we've discussed a couple of the subjects, discussed a couple of the stories, but for the UK fan base and the 4,000 counting fans and everybody that's kind of listening and watching to this podcast, how would you sell the book to them? Where can they go get it? Where can they follow you on social media? Yeah, kind of just give the fans a bit of spiel about the book that we haven't already discussed.
I'd say go on to Amazon to find the Audible edition of it. And if you don't have Audible, you sign up for a free trial on Audible, and you can download a copy of it free. That works for me too. I would say your best bet is to go to Apple or to Audible, but also go to Apple Books, and you get a little
Okay.
cheaper version of it. If you don't want to do the Audible edition, go to Apple Books and you get an audio copy for $9.99. But that's what I would recommend. And I'll just say this, I know that a lot of these names obviously are the big marquee names and maybe don't mean anything on the other side of the pond, but the action about it is just, to me, interesting. I think a lot of people don't realize that maybe the greatest hitter in the history of baseball wasn't even an American hitter, and that's Sadaharu O, who played in the Japanese leagues and had numbers that Ty Cobb and Ted Williams wish they had.
Wow.
And so it just goes to show that
Cool.
it doesn't have to be on your side of the world to be interesting, because the stories are there and you may recognize a name or two, but I'll tell you, just to understand and visualize these kinds of things happening at the highest level of hockey is just, to me, is unheard of. And it's just baffling to see that this happens at the highest level of a sport.
I know I said two more questions, but I do have one more. Final question. Obviously, you got a couple of baseball books in the tank, a couple of hockey books in the tank. Are we going to see more books out of yourself in the years to come?
If these books can finally start taking off the way that I want them to, I would definitely be open to doing a college football book. In the United
Okay.
States, college football is very huge, and it's very catered to something like this, where the broadcasters can tell the story of school to school, fan base to fan base, and some stories that are real, true insanity. Maybe not quite as insane as hockey, but college football is definitely a sport that is catered to this kind of thing.
especially at that college level, they're all trying to get that NFL contract. Those guys are all tough as old boots. They really give it everything. And yeah, do you know what? Like from listening to the stuff that I've already listened to, I'm sure the rest of the book's gonna be great. I I like sport, so I would probably be listening to an American football one, even though I'm not a massive American football fan. I've been to it at London, and it was great, but like I would listen to that. But anyway, Kurt, I know we're pressed for time. Ladies and gents, please do go check out the book. Stay tuned to our social media on the back of this coming out. We'll be doing a couple of little competitions where you can get your hands on a copy of the book. And yeah, Kurt, thank you very much.
Voices of Hockey. Broadcasters reflect on the fastest game on earth.
Perfect sign off, ladies and gents. Right, we will see you for another episode very, very soon. Peace.